More than that, this is about the soul, your soul and everyone's soul. You wouldn't think that Shannon might have investigated souls, but I'll explain how he did. Here we can see a knight who's returned from a crusade home, and the plague is ravaging Europe, and unfortunately death has come when he least expected it, just prior to his arrival home. Instead of succumbing willingly to death, he challenges death to a game of chess. You can guess what he hopes will happen if he wins the game of chess, but it's pretty hard to challenge someone like Death, who's been around for quite a while and has seen a lot of games of chess, to win. Nevertheless, as long as the game continues, the knight hopes to survive, and hopefully he can continue playing the game long enough to get home. Now, 17th century in particular, and onwards through the 18th and even the 19th century, people were questioning the presence, the existence of the soul. In particular, they were looking at machines as a challenge to the existence of the soul, because it seemed like we might all just be machines. And so clockwork had come around maybe 14th century, and by the period here, 18th century, clockwork and mechanisms were exceedingly complex. And people had proposed automata could do just about anything that humans could do, even play chess. You've probably seen this famous chess-playing automaton, the Turk, 1769, designed by Baron Wolfgang von Kempelen. And if you've read it, anything about it, you might even have discovered that Napoleon played it and was beaten by it, as were many others. It played a really good game, and this is how it did it. There was a chess master hidden inside. It wasn't a real machine in the way that we think about it now. It wasn't a dwarf, as some reports have had. It was a full-size chess master. Even over the period in which this thing was exhibited, several chess masters kept the secret and played against the challengers who were above. Now, Babbage, who came along, as you know, with one of the first, well, let's say the first, for simplicity, programmable computer, didn't actually go so far as to wonder if his machine, or at least to design a machine for playing chess. He did think of tic-tac-toe, which to his mind would have been entertaining for the masses. He thought he could charge a fee. He thought he might even be able to get enough money to build his second machine by having people pay tickets to play tic-tac-toe in a public place. He abandoned the idea, figuring it was way too complicated, would take up most of the rest of his life, might not succeed, certainly would be unlikely to make enough money for the amount he needed. So Babbage can't contribute to this. However, early 20th century, maybe by some articles anyway, the late 19th century, we have a Spaniard whose name I'll call Leonardo because I can't pronounce the rest of it. Are there any Spanish speakers here? No? No one can speak it. Built this machine, an automaton. I also won't pronounce the name. It was a chess player, or the chess player. Now, this one was a real machine. It had a decision tree encoded in a series of switches, and it operated only on the end game. The idea was that a human player would move the black king, and the machine would play with a white king and a single rook, and it would guarantee to checkmate the black king, basically by pushing it against the end of the board using the rook and manoeuvring the white king into place. Now, the first version had a mechanical arm to move the pieces. With his son, he worked on a second version, which you can see illustrated here, which actually has magnets beneath the board. And you can see in the photo on the right there, Leonardo is demonstrating it to Norbert Wiener, who we've all come across before. Now, the question is really, if a machine can do this, can play chess, how is that interfering with our conception of ourselves and our, if you like, uniqueness on the planet? And this is where the idea of the soul comes in. And a lot of the romantic literature of the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries was investigating this relationship between humans' uniqueness, our souls, which are supposed to be God-given, and our ability to manipulate things around us in a way that really machines could do just as well. So this is the relationship between these two machines and the soul, if you like, the human machine and the mechanical devices and electrical devices we built. Now, Claude Shannon was also very interested in chess, and he recognised that not only was it an interesting problem in and of itself, for all the reasons that the predecessors had also recognised, but also if we could solve problems about making machines to play chess, we could potentially apply the solutions in different contexts. And he recognised here 4 reasons for picking chess in particular as a game that we should get computers to tackle. The first, as we can see here, is that the problem's sharply defined. So the operations have very strict rules and we have a clear ultimate goal to get checkmate. The second is it's not so simple as tic-tac-toe, which Babbage was envisaging. It's also not so complex that we can't even imagine a solution to it. Thirdly, as I said, it's generally required, or we accept, that it's required that we think to play chess. So if we can come up with a machine that plays chess, we're actually challenging our notion of what it means to think and what it means to be human in particular. Lastly, chess has discrete positions on the board, which matches very neatly against our idea and his idea of how computers work. So it was a natural fit, if you like. He came up with 2 main algorithms for this. A brute force algorithm called Type A, in which basically we examine a whole lot of moves that we could make. We examine a whole lot of moves which our opponent could make, and from there a whole lot of moves which we could make in response, and we end up with a massive tree to search. Now, any chess player who's even half good is going to be looking beyond 3 moves. But with some simple calculations, he showed that if you wanted to look beyond about 3 moves, using some assumptions, you'd have to wait about 10 to the 90 years using their technology for a game to be completed by this machine. So it wasn't a practical solution, even though theoretically it was possible. An alternative, Type B strategy, was a bit more sensible, if you like, in its choices, and it was still a computer strategy. It wasn't a human strategy, but it was related to the way humans thought about the board. And they would look for periods of play which were quasi-stable. That is, there were dynamic exchanges that occurred, for instance, a swap of queens, and during the intermediate period of that swap, the board is not stable. You can almost guarantee that there's going to be a sequence of changes. So he suggested that the algorithm that we would use would look beyond those, and it would only evaluate the state of the board at these quasi-stable positions. And then we would also prune off options rather than explore every available option that we thought was unsuitable. And he had a number of different ways of evaluating board positions, for instance by the number of pieces each side had, or by their position on the board, or by the openness of play for one player or another, that enabled the algorithm to evaluate the relative merits of different positions. How do you do that? I'm not going to talk about it now, just to finish up, but you can read the slide, and here's a couple of very famous contributors to this debate talking about the kinds of algorithms that you might apply in these cases. Thanks for the time.